I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Human Design Podcast with me, your host, Emma Dunwoody. I'm a qualified master coach and human behaviour specialist, as well as being a qualified human design coach. And I work with clients every single day to answer the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? I also assist them to transition from the person they think they should be to the person they really are on the inside. I teach people how to actually live their design instead of just knowing it. And if this is something that you want to do too, well, stay tuned or reach out for private coaching or Human Design Unpacks, where I show you exactly how to live your design.
Hey, before we get into today's episode, I want to share an incredible opportunity for you to create what I believe is one of the most powerful foundations to transformation, happiness, well-being, vitality, abundance, all of these incredible results that I've experienced over the last number of years. And that is with the FLFE. I know, if you've been around a while, you've heard me bang on about it. But now I'm working with these guys because I believe so strongly in this business. In 2019, we put the FLFE, the Focused Life Force Energy, onto our home. And from that point, everything in my life amplified in a good way. And we're talking about a time in the world where everyone was freaking out. We were living in lockdown. Everything felt challenging, yet myself and my family seemed to be having the time of our life. I went from $35,000 to $350,000 that year in my business, not to mention the improved relationships, the harmony within our family, the health that I've watched this FLFE help me create and amplify, even healing things like broken bones and childhood asthma. It has been such an incredibly impactful thing in my life and my world. I mean, in lockdown, I didn't even want to leave the house. None of us did. Like, we were the only people who were really happy to be locked in a house, cut off from everybody, because the FLFE felt so incredibly good. Now, it's my belief that the way that this really works is because we're operating from this higher consciousness. It puts us in this place where it's like living and being and working and acting from a temple. How is that a good thing? Well, that means that we have access to higher frequency, higher consciousness. It means that every question we ask, we're going to get a higher frequency answer. Every time we want to heal something in our body, we have a higher frequency energy behind our healing. Everything gets amplified because everything is higher on the consciousness scale, meaning that we get where we want to go faster. And look, that's really been my results. I think one of the things that I love so much about it is noticing how much I really trust, love, and back myself. And I really think this has got so much to do with it. My plants are thriving, my animals are thriving, my kids are thriving. We're all thriving because of this FLFE. And I really believe that it is fundamental for any transformational journey and really vitality and spiritual evolution for everyone. So if you're curious, go check out the links in the show notes. You can do your free trial. No obligation, no credit card, no nothing like that. And then if you decide to sign up, it's super cheap. It's less than a coffee a day a week. It's a really, really affordable, powerful thing that you can do for yourself to completely transform your life. So go check it out. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human Design Podcast. You are not in the wrong place. You're just hearing a different voice today. This is Jess Bubbico, and I am here with Jenni Crowther. We're doing the Transits podcast while Emma and the crew is out on the Camino. And we kind of are like we were supposed to go on the Camino. Neither of us ended up on the Camino, but we're kind of on our own journey here today, which is really fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the opportunity to do this in a slightly different way with a different person. I've been following Emma's and Taylor's journey, and it looks amazing. I'm actually quite glad I'm not there, given all the early mornings they're having. Every time I see them like 6:30 already walking, I'm like, you must have got up at 5. I'm quite glad that I'm not doing it.
You know, it's funny. They look like they're having a great time.
Yeah.
I am an early bird, so I will get up I pretty much watch the sunrise every morning because I'm right on the East Coast of the United States, right on the coast. But it's more the long days for me. You can hear our like non-sacral beings here, manifester, projector. We're good. You guys wake up, do your man gen thing. But it does look quite amazing, and I've loved watching it as well. So yeah.
Do you know what Elizabeth is? I know that Taylor and Emma and Cooper are all man gens. I don't know I think
she's also a man gen.
Yeah, it's a man gen project. Let's just
yeah. Yes, absolutely. So anyways, I'm excited to be here with you. I'm going to kind of hand it off to you to kick us off talking about the transits, and we'll see where today takes us.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic. I mentioned last time as Emma and I were talking about the fact that you and I were going to be talking today, the general wisdom in human design is that because of the way the auras function, projectors and generators tend to feel other people more dominantly in their experience of life than they do the transits, and manifestors and reflectors, because your auras are more protective for the human aura, may be more influenced by the transit. So it'd be interesting to know if you experience that.
Yes, I will say that. I'll just before we start, it's funny. I listened to last month's transit podcast, but I guess I didn't listen all the way through to hear that part. But one of the things that I've noticed is I write a Substack, and I will sit down and I will feel the energy of what's to come. And then I will write from that place. And it's funny because as I was actually re-listening this morning to the June transit, and you were talking about, it's going the 3, we're entering back into the gate 3. And just a couple of days beforehand, I was like, I need to write about the Gene Key 3 in my Substack newsletter. And I sat and I wrote this whole thing. And I thought, that was kind of weird. I don't really know where that came from. But as I was listening back to the transit report, I thought, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense that the energy is coming. So yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was 3 days ago that the North Node moved into Gate 3.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so generally when I'm living, when Emma and I first decided to do this together, when she first invited me, I kind of made a conscious decision to be alone a lot so that I could really experience the transits, knowing that, human aura interactions were going to be quite dominant. And so for this month, for me, I'm in a quite unusual setting for my usual raison d'etre of life, which is just hang out on my own a lot of the time. But I'm working on retreat. So I'm subject to at least 12 different auras every week. And personal aura is really an impression on me. So the only way that I can experience the transits really at the moment is through observing the pattern in the groups of the people. And it's a really nice kind of rhythm for watching the transits, because they're coming, there's a different group every 6 days. So we're more or less in alignment with the sun moving through its different gates.
Yeah.
And we were here this time last year in June. So I remember a similar pattern of the sun and the earth, and the June pattern of, the first week is gate 45 with the sun, the beginning of June. So this gathering the tribe together, it's quite social, chatty, outgoing, feels like a really, warm and generous kind of aura, very supportive of each other.
Yeah.
The week after that, we get the sun in gate 12, the gate of social caution. And that was it was tremendously introverted that week. We were compared to the week before, we were like, wow, it's like getting blood out of a stone, getting conversation out of anyone this week.
Totally. It's so cool to be able to have that level of knowledge as well whenever you're in a space, and also the understanding of how it's a dynamic energy and moving through each of the lines of the gate, to be able to see how it progresses and how people change. And it would be really interesting too. I'm sure you've noticed this with even retreats and the theme of the retreat and what the retreat is called and what kind of people intuitively feel to create during specific weeks and specific transits. So that's really cool and very unique to be able to have that experience.
Yeah, I do wonder, particularly on the gate 12 weeks, like whether introverts are naturally attracted to that particular week, or whether whoever comes on that week is influenced by the kind of social cautionness of the gate 12. It's like chicken or egg. Like, I don't know which one comes first.
Totally. That would be a great week to have like a projector retreat or like a manifestor retreat. Like everybody come, be in your own energy, relax, retreat, do stuff, don't do stuff. Like that would be a good time.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I'm doing human design readings here, and actually the majority of the projectors and reflectors, we even had a reflector, were first week, that gate 45 week. And then obviously hardly anyone did anything the gate 12 week. The following week, which we've just finished, the sun in gate 15 over the summer solstice, the gate of extremes. And it really was a lot. And the extremes were like, I did maybe 7 or 8 human design readings, all emotional generators, or either manifesting or otherwise, but just a lot. It was like a lot.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to experience some of these. I know we're going to get into July's transit, but I'll say for myself, I've got the Gene Key 15 in a really prominent place in my chart. It's sits right in the earth, my unconscious earth. So it's my purpose and my activation sequence. And it was really interesting because I've been working with that energy so much over the last couple of months that when it came, I was like, this feels so good. Like, I wonder what my experience of it was like last year. So it'd be really cool to have like a transit journal just to like keep up with like, what was that like last year? What were my patterns like, over the last couple of years? So
are you an equinox baby with the cross of the vessel of love?
I sure am. March 22nd. Yeah. I'm a spring equinox baby.
Yeah. I mean, God, I love the cross of the vessel of love. I love that balance, that unbelievable cross. My business partner / work wife, Tashi, who I'm working with here, she's a cross of the vessel of love, and solstice. She's just had her birthday this week, so yeah. I have a lot of them around, and I have all the 4 plug-in gates. So I have 57, 29, 5, and 51. So I activate the full cross of the vessel of love. So it's one of my favorites.
I love that. Oh, we're going to be plugged in for the next hour, however long this is. So amazing. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So it's just, my observation of the transits often when I do this podcast is having felt them really physically in my body, but actually this time it's just through observation of the patterns. As we're recording this, the sun just went into gate 52, which means the earth will be in gate 58. This combination is another one of my favorites, the 52 and the 58, the stillness, the joy, double lake, double mountain. Like it's just, whenever I meet anyone that has these 2 gates in a prominent position, it's so palpable to me. I can feel the joy. So I'm really interested to see what comes out for the group of stillness and joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we just moved then, I think, into the left angle cross of healing in terms of incarnation crosses, I believe, this week. Right?
We will do. I don't think we're there yet. But
okay. Yeah. Well, I will say it's interesting to observe. Do you find that you can feel the energies a few days beforehand as they're coming in for yourself?
Quite often, yeah.
Yeah. This weekend, I kept trying to go and live life. I'm like, I'm going to go socialize. I'm going to go at literally every social thing I tried to do. I went to a retreat. There was supposed to be a 2.5 day retreat. I got there, canceled. No one was there. Then it's like, I tried to go to this, people were meeting up. It dissolved, didn't happen. And I just had to be in stillness all weekend long. And I was like, okay, what's here for me? What can I learn? I wrestled with it. My line 4 was like, I should be peopling right now. But I just think there's so much to be learned from that slowing down, that absorbing, that being with the energies and how they are instead of trying to push through and resist. So,
yeah, I mean, I really love when I'm completely free and fluid like that. When, at the moment I have, commitments, there are times that I need to be certain places and be doing certain things according to the retreat schedule. But for most of the rest of my life, I'm a little bit in that, what you're describing, that just responding to whatever's happening today. It's like I can wake up in the morning and be like, okay, where are we at? What's going on? and experience, the transits, the energy, the background frequency like that.
Yeah. I love that. And even, I mean, for those people who are like in jobs or, have that 9 to 5 or whatever, that maybe you don't have that freedom and flexibility in your schedule, would be really interesting to start to notice and observe in your daily life, the different rhythms of how people move through your office, and maybe if there's different clients that come in, if you work with clients, or if work starts to slow down. Or, I mean, interesting, here in the US, we're about to have 4th of July week next week. And I know that typically for me, the week before a holiday, I'm like, oh, next week's the holiday. It's going to be a relaxed time. I'm going to have a couple of days off in the middle of the week. I want to start slowing down. So it's like almost like that gate 52 of stillness and slowing down is a nice prep for what's to come next week.
It's fascinating that the 4th of July weekend is exactly opposite New Year's Eve in the mandala, and they're both 39-38. Gate of propagation, gate of the fighter. Like, those who listen to this podcast regularly will have heard of me talking about these two energies fueled by alcohol and fireworks, like how explosive they are.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great point. I love that. Yeah.
So
totally. Amazing.
It does lead to that real sense, and it's root pressure, individuality. It's a really interesting combination. And the fact that our two biggest alcohol fueled fireworks celebrations are 38, 39s.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Be careful, everybody out there.
Exactly.
Fireworks and alcohol. We don't want to do those necessarily together, but
no. Other things I've noticed this month for June, I've had a flurry of sphinxes coming for readings. I've had 5 Cross of the Sphinx come for readings this month. I actually have no conclusion or what, like, I haven't noticed why that is, but it's just really interesting. Maybe it's the cross of the vessel of love, bringing in the sphinxes, all these G center crosses, but there's been a lot of sphinxes in my life. 75% of my readings have been 5-1 profiles. I don't know what's happened to all the 5-1s, but they've all suddenly gone, hey, I think I need human design in my life.
Yeah. Were they all people who are mostly new to human design, the sphinxes?
A little bit, I think. Hang on, let me think. Sphinxes are coming with a little bit of experience with human design, but the 5-1s are all pretty much brand new to human design completely. So there's just been, they're the patterns of who's let's call it activating. I don't know what that really means, but I'm definitely seeing like certain like gluts of people in my world.
Yeah. Super fascinating. And there's no common themes between them?
Not that I've noticed. Not currently. Not with the book that I'm meeting the people. No, it just seemed, I'm just like, okay, there's something going on with the sphinxes right now. The 1 and the 2, the gates of across the middle. I don't know.
I guess we shall see. It's the rise of the sphinxes. Kind of sounds nice.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah. I love it.
The other thing I saw very prominently between, I think it was the 8th and the 11th of June. I don't know if anyone can think back to what they were doing around then. It was a very peculiar kind of 3 or 4 days. There was a lot of what I will call letting go karma, which included like a lot of people dying. It's certainly in my immediate sphere. There was just this huge amount of sudden upheaval and things that had been hanging on for a very, very, very long time, suddenly ready to go. And it was, there was just a period of 3 or 4 days when everything here just like fell into absolute chaos. And we were all looking at each other like, what on earth is going on?
Yeah.
So, I don't know if anyone else noticed that, but
I noticed that for myself. There was a point this month where it felt like a lot of for me, themes from 2018, 2019, old stuff coming back up to the surface. And it did feel like a period of upheaval for myself as well. So I can certainly relate to that. I also think one of the things that I've noticed is I had this influx of people coming in for sessions to go over their gene keys and human design, and especially entrepreneurs. And it feels like there's almost this chapter that's ending for a lot of people that creates that sort of chaotic things coming up, maybe dissatisfaction with what they're currently doing, or that bit of upheaval like you're talking about. And I think it's causing that creation, that friction of people going, and maybe it's because I'm the vessel of love, which has a lot to do with direction, that people come to me and go, what direction am I moving in next? You know, where am I going as this upheaval is happening? So I can relate to that definitely earlier this month, of that a bit of internal chaos that ultimately always leads to ordering of some kind.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is, really where we're heading next. I mean, when we're looking into the next couple of months, this is a huge theme. I mean, I'll talk about it in a minute, but the nodes, shifting with North Node into 3, which is making the channel with Pluto, it's going to be a big influence. Like, that is not an insignificant activation.
Well, I'm excited to hear about it.
Well, we had it on. It was on for pretty much most of May. Jupiter was in gate 3, so that was, kind of it felt like the beginning of the process, but it continues. So for those, I'm just going to give a point of housekeeping. I'm kind of aware from some of the comments and the questions that I get in my Instagram that there are lots of new listeners to the Transits podcast, and I've been doing this for 2 years, and not that I'm expecting anyone to go back and listen to 2 years worth of Transits podcast, but every time, I do little teaching bits and little educational pieces about how the transits work. So a point of housekeeping for those newer to the Transits podcast: there are a couple of documents available on my website, which will always be linked in the show notes. It's jennicrowther.co.uk, and there's a podcast page. And on that page, there are 2 documents called the Wheels of the Year. There's Wheel of the Year 1 and 2. And I created them to help people help myself ultimately visualize. It's like the human design mandala, for those who are already quite familiar with the system, they'll be familiar with the view of it. But I've just kind of added to and tweaked and re-visualized the mandala so that it's a little bit more obvious, the dates and the gates and the position of the gates in the Bodygraph. So if you're new listening and you don't have the Wheels of the Year and you want to get them, you can go to my website and go and download those for free and follow along, because I often refer to them when we're in the middle of this.
Beautiful.
So let's get into July, having done a little bit of a look back at June. I will start with the general themes of the month. The Sun Earth is the thing for those newer to the podcast. The Sun Earth is the consistent bit, if you like, in human design transits. The Sun and the Earth are always in the same gate line at the same point every year. That's what our year is based on. So we're basically looking at the solar year when we're looking at the human design mandala. Everything else with it changes, so year on year. So there are consistencies every year, which we're just about to talk about, the Sun Earth activations. But I did go into them in quite a lot of detail in last July's episode. So if you go back to episode 193 of the Human Design podcast, if you want to re-listen, I go into the July Sun Earth transits in much more detail. But we're going to summarize them. So if you're looking at the Wheel of the Year, if you've just been paused the podcast, gone over and got the Wheel of the Year document, where we're looking at the Sun at the moment is down the bottom and just to the right of the base of the wheel. We've just gone past, in the northern hemisphere, the summer solstice, in the southern hemisphere, the winter solstice. So we've just gone past the Sun in gate 15. We're currently, at time of recording, in gate 52 with the Sun. So if you look at the Wheel of the Year, you'll see that down at the bottom, just to give you an orientation of where the Sun is. As we're going into July, it's quite nice to look at Wheel of the Year 2, because we can look at the base trigram. And that's one of 8 base trigrams that gives us like the flavor, the elemental flavor of where we're at. And we're at the base trigram of mountain, keeping still. So the first 3 gates of where we're at now, as we talk about moving from the end of June and into early July, we're looking at base trigram mountain, and the 3 gates are in the root. So we've got gate 52, then gate 39 from the 2nd to the 6th of July, and gate 53 from the 7th to the 12th of July. So not only are we looking at the bottom of the wheel, we're also looking at the bottom center in the Bodygraph. We're looking at the root. And so these three gates that we get in this first part of the section of mountain are all about providing fuel. Everything in the route provides a fuel of some description, a pressure or an energy to, in this case, 52, the energy to concentrate, 39, the energy to provoke feeling and moods and emotion, and with 53, the fuel for a new cycle to begin. So this is the energies that we're looking to get as we collectively move into the beginning of July. We've also got Mercury moving quite closely to the sun. And so Mercury in early July, in the first week, is going to be moving through those same three gates. So what you can also see as you're looking at the Wheel of the Year is the colouring. I've coloured the gates all individually in different colours. If you look at a normal body graph, you've got 4 centres that are brown, 2 that are yellow, 2 that are red, and 1 that's green. In my Wheel of the Year, on Wheel of the Year 1, you'll see that I've kind of rainbow coloured the centres so that we can identify them clearly around the outside of the wheel. So what you'll see as you look at the Wheel of the Year 1 is that there are these 3 little red root gates in a sea of blue, which is the throat. So the quarter that we're in now, in human design terms, that runs from the cross quarter day of Beltane around sort of early May, all the way through to Lunasan in early August, is the quarter of purpose fulfilled through form, the quarter of civilization. And it's all about communication and the energy that fuels our purpose in life. So we are in a really interesting time where the sun goes through every single throat gate, all 11 throat gates get activated in this quarter. So as we move towards the end of July, we're then looking at the sun getting back into the throat gates after it's been through the root. And then later in July, we finish up that process. So when we're looking at, sorry, Jess, did you want to
I just want to say, this is beautiful. Like, if you haven't downloaded this, go and download it. This is like absolutely beautiful. So anyways,
Jess is discovering the wheels for the first time.
I just discovered the wheel for the first time. I actually think I looked at this when I listened to one of the transit podcasts, like probably a year ago. And I'm remembering it, but I'm looking at this and I'm just mostly because I get somebody else to design beautiful things, because just even the organization, I'm like, beautiful, love it. Everybody go download it if you don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of digress. The part of my design that I think creates this is the 6162. I have those as so I'm on the same cross as Ra was on, the cross of the Clarion, but the opposite way around. So I'm the October version of it. And the 61 is the gate of inner truth and mystery. And the 62 is the gate of detail. And it's the gate that really is able to describe the mystery in detail. And so I feel like the 6162 is the part of my design that gives me this visual capacity to order and name and label and make things make sense visually.
You know, it's interesting. I work with Amanda Foley. She and I created a messaging by design class, and she would do the visuals and she's like, okay, go this, and I'm just sitting there like, this is incredible. I'm so impressed by this right now. So anyways, absolutely beautiful. She's got circles and putting this together and that together. And I'm like, okay, I can initiate it. You please go use your gifts and make it look incredible in the way you do. So
I'm really visual. I love a one pager. I have to see everything. I work really well if I can see everything just in one page. So yeah.
She's the same way too. So anyways,
I digress. I'd be interested to know if she has gate 62 defined well.
She does. She's the right angle cross of the Maya, and her 62 is her sun and the 61 is her earth. So totally makes sense.
That's what we do. That's what it does.
Yeah.
That's the function of the 6162.
Yeah. And the right angle cross of the vessel's love is like, I just love you. I'll help you find the right direction, but please call somebody else to make it look pretty. So no, I'm sure there's vessel of loves out there who are very visually gifted in that way. But anyways, I digress.
So from the wheel, you'll get an overview of the process that we're in at the moment as we move into July, this process of root fuel and then throat activations. The 3 throat activations that we'll get in July. From the 13th of July, the sun will go into gate 62, as we've just mentioned, is about details, facts, logical communication, visual and naming of things. And it basically, its function is to create common references so that we can logically discuss things. So that's what we're looking at from the 13th of July. From the 19th, the sun will move into gate 56, which is the other side of collective sharing. If the 62 does it logically, the 56 does it much more abstractly. It wants to talk about stories from the past, pieces of the puzzle. Yeah, it's much more about describing human experience rather than logically presenting facts. And then the last week of July, gate 31, we're coming down into the sort of the throat gates that come off the G center. And gate 31 is the gate of authoritative leadership and the use of the voice as a tool to not only lead others, but to also express your own leadership of self so that others can see it as an example.
Beautiful. I wanted to just say quickly too, with a lot of these energies, just even looking at that 62 and the 56, those are two that I've studied a little bit more in depth. But one of the things that I love, and you said this on the last podcast, is that idea of like the polarity. And I think with the gene keys and seeing it in the same way, it's like where we can express the shadow, we can express the gift, we can express the city. It's either there or it's not. So sometimes getting lost in the details, sometimes being able to use them to fuel something forward or to be able to serve through your work or whatever it may be. Same thing with that 56, telling empowering stories, telling disempowering stories, different things like that. So I love keeping an eye on and my mind too of like how those shadows might show up and express during that time for me as well, and seeing it as that opportunity to almost liberate myself in some kind of way in places that I may have held myself back in the past with those energies.
I really love that. I should be able to retain this information, but my ajna is wide open and I can't retain anything unless it's right in front of me. Can you remind me the 62? It's not intellect because that's the 61.
What the shadow of the 62 is?
Yeah, I should know this. It's in my bloody activation sequence and I've studied it for 7 years, but I do forget.
Yeah, no, sometimes it's hard to keep it. So we have the shadow of intellect, the gift of precision, and the city of impeccability. And one of the things I'll say again, just working closely with Amanda, who I know is probably listening. So, hey, Amanda, is just this idea of the importance of the energy behind our words. Like it's easy to get lost in the details of what we're doing or what we're saying or how something should look, but really remembering to come into that space of the intention behind what we create is just as important as what we say or the details that we put into it. So I feel, at least for me, I love the gene keys. I see it as this, being able to work through that shadow and the gift in the city as this way to unlock something within myself by just leaning into my own tension or constriction or, whatever may be showing up. It's so easy to want to just go like, oh my gosh, it has to be perfect. Let me just keep trying to perfect it more versus just leaning in and going like, okay, I feel this. I'm going to allow it. The gene keys process that allow, accept, embrace. So again, that's just one I've been focusing on a lot lately, just from my own experiences, people I've worked with, et cetera. But I think that can offer us, the gene keys can offer such a rich experience of how to transform these energies as they show up and come up inside of ourselves and give. And again, vessel of love, fashion, direction, direction and a way through the challenges.
I had a really interesting journey with the 62 shadow, because I'd built a lot of my personality around my intellect, and she was sharp. I mean, the thing with the 62 is it can twist the data in any way it wants. I could argue anyone into the ground if I wanted to. And the way I rehabituated myself was I had to hold this little mantra of I would rather be kind than be right, because I was so obsessed with using my intellect to be right that I was actually being pretty unkind, a lot of the time, just because I could. So now I think I use the precision of language to describe love, actually, like to describe a frequency of love rather than just manhandling my intellect.
Yeah. which ultimately at the end of the day, I think you talked about this last podcast, comes back to this idea of where are we? Most of these shadows come from fear of some kind, and so being able to use the transits as well almost becomes an opportunity for healing, to see the energies come up, whether it's something that we recognize in someone else and we can empathize or have compassion towards, or something that we see within ourselves in those moments and can lean into them and love ourselves through them.
Yeah, and I think from a mechanical perspective, with the 62 being the only gate pointing at a completely open ajna, there was just this desperate, I was so lost in the not self theme of pretending to be certain, and so I was using this 63 in my intellect to try and be sure, try and be certain, because I thought, and now I'm just like, I have no idea at all about anything at a mental level, nor do I care to.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I was just talking with a friend about this morning, that ajna. So yeah, I love this. Amazing.
So that's the summary of the Sun Earth, particularly the sun, the gates that the sun is going through. Like I said, you can go back to last July's podcast and have a little dig more into that, because I do go into more detail. As I kind of trailered, the big news for July really is that we've got this new nodal axis that came in on the 23rd of June. We'd been for a long time in the 28-27 combination, and about 5 months I think we were in it. So it's quite a big shift. So to give the details, I know some people listen to this with pad and pen at the ready. The south node moved from gate 28 to gate 50, and the north node moved from gate 27 to gate 3. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you will have seen in my stories that I posted about it as it happened. So what we're looking at with the nodes is we're looking at axes, opposites across the mandala, same as the sun earth. Wherever the sun is, the earth is always directly opposite on the bodygraph, on the mandala. And then when you're doing nodes, it's also the same. They come in these pairings, gates that are directly opposite from each other. The north node and the south node being the trajectory of the earth through the nodes of the moon, which is basically the path that the moon makes around the earth and the path that the earth makes around the sun, and where those two bits integrate. So it's not a real thing. It's not like a actual embodied matter thing. It's a point in space. It's a calculated point. The nodes of the moon are the calculated points in space about the trajectory of the earth and where we're going. So in human design terms, because I'm not an astrologer, like a traditional astrologer, in human design terms, the nodes are representing what we are designed to look at in our environment. They're a lot less about, internal activations, although they do activate the body graph. But they're often this representation of what are we going to encounter in our environment, which people, which situations are we particularly attuned to, and they sort of, this environmental situational aspect provides like the raw materials of our purpose. So it's almost like the stage in which our personal play is playing out on, if you like. So if you're just learning to interpret your own chart, you can also use this information to think about the way you think about your nodes, rather than just thinking about them in terms of how they activate the body graph. So for our purposes, looking at the global transits, we're looking at this investigation of the nodes to look at the current human trajectory. Like what are all of us focused on? What are we all encountering in our environment? As a side note, in my own, so while I've been learning and considering my own human design, this was the aspect I found most difficult, because I was born on the new moon during a solar eclipse, like almost to the minute. So
wow,
my nodes and my personality, sun and moon and earth, are all exactly the same.
Wow.
So it's actually very hard for me to differentiate myself from my environment. Like wherever I go, my environment is almost an exact reflection. I become this, I don't know where I begin and the outside ends, to be honest.
Yeah. That is super fascinating. and I know we'll get deeper into the 60 and the 3, but it's neat to think of it as this idea of being able to, I love the idea of collectively what we're going through and we're moving through. And the idea too of just what the 60 and the 3 is all about, at least the way I understand it, is a lot of like moving through limitations and charting new unknowns, whether it's within ourselves or the world around us. So I'm excited to dive deeper into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just for those that, if you're also looking at your body graph now, and you're like, my nodes are the same as my personality sun Earth, that means you were born at an eclipse.
Very cool.
So what we're looking at collectively, what we have been looking at, it's helpful when we're looking at where we're at now. It's helpful to look back at where we've just come from so we can get some kind of understanding of what it might look like. So for the past 5 months, we've been looking at 27 and 28. 27's keynote is the transitoriness of power and influence. We've spent the last 5 months watching people who used to have a lot of power start to lose their power. If you look at the world leaders, a lot of them are starting to lose their power, whether it's being forcibly taken from them or whatever. There's this clear expression in our environment, and we're all looking at it, of, oh yeah, power and influence do not last. They come and go. There are, elected heads of state, and then they lose their power for whatever reason. So it starts to perhaps even influence our own life. Maybe we're seeing things that used to have a lot of power and influence over us, and our own sense of purpose and meaning in life lose their hold on us. And that can feel quite destabilizing. The 28 is part of the channel of struggle, which is all about finding personal purpose and meaning in life. And if something that used to have a lot of influence in your life is either not there or you're not interested in it anymore, that can feel kind of, wow, who am I, what's happening, and what is the purpose and meaning of my life now?
Yeah. No big deal questions like that. I'm reflecting as you're speaking about how you talked about the fifth line at the very beginning. You were saying you've had a lot of fifth lines come into your life in that 5-1. And it's interesting because I always think about the 5 really connecting to power and what that deeper purpose of what the 5 is all about. To be here, to be able to shift power, to bring empowerment back to the masses of people and remind them of their power. So it's interesting that a lot of fifth lines are showing up as we're seeing that shift from power over to power within. I think from a fifth line perspective, that's really the message that, at least the way I understand it, the fifth line is here to bring and to remind us of. So it's interesting that as we're seeing that collective shift of that 28 and 27 together. Is that what you said? 28, 27? Yeah. We're seeing perhaps some people even coming forward and exploring what that 5 is all about.
Yeah. And I'm a 5-1 profile. So I feel like I've really gone through that journey of, through my own insecurity, which was just a function of me not having fully developed my first line. I wasn't giving enough time and attention and energy to my own foundation. Having done that and created a stable platform, I no longer use my 5 as a power mechanism over people. I really used to, and I really don't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a really nice observation.
Yeah. And to just pairing onto that, sorry, everybody's probably like, this is so different than how Emma and Jenni do this together, but it's a fun little pattern interrupt. Just even how you talked about needing that alone time, and you spend a lot of time alone. And I think about that one, when you have it on that unconscious side, how important it is to spend time alone so that you can go out and truly understand whatever is on that conscious side of your chart. So if you spend that time alone in solitude as a first line, being in nature, connecting with yourself, it directly impacts your ability to go out and have those breakthroughs of going, oh gosh, was I using my power in a way out of insecurity? Let me take some alone time, go within, nurture myself, connect with nature, get the messages, and then be able to go out and impact in that more evolved way, if you will. So,
yeah. And it's interesting, we've got the 28 with this transitoriness of power and influence, but then we've also been looking at 27, and that was in the North Node. So we were moving towards that as a growth point. The keynote for 27 is the enhancement of the quality and substance of all activities through caring and nourishment. So we've probably been noticing that all the ways that we haven't actually been caring for ourselves, we might be coming as a result of this past 5 months to the collective conclusion that it doesn't actually really matter what power and influence people have. What actually matters is if they cared about others, if they were cared for, if they cared for themselves. So the journey from 28 to 27 is a really potentially beautiful flowering, if you like.
Yeah, I love that. I love that dance. I love that dance between the opposites. That's what I like about the nodes. So beautiful.
Yeah. And personally, you know, if we have been interested in attaining power and influence in the world, we might realize we're actually only interested in deep nourishment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
totally.
I see a lot, you know, it's a function of living and working on retreat, because that's usually what people have realized. I'm sick of striving. I just want to nourish myself. I need a break.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the axis we're moving into, yes, we have the 3 making a channel with Pluto in gate 60, but the nodal axis is bringing in gate 50, which is also part of the channel of preservation, along with 27. So there's a similar theme continuing. Yes, we've looked at our sense of nourishment and caring. 50 is talking about values, historical values, traditional values, the values that we use in order to decide who and what to care for and how. It's tribal, it's conservative, it's part of it's on the spleen, so it's got this instinctive memory for it, and it remembers the past. It wants to preserve those values. So for the first part of this transit with the nodes, and it's a shorter transit, it's only 2 and a bit months, we're going to have our attention pulled to those places where certain traditional values are valuable still, certain traditional values are stuck, refusing to change and adapt to this rapidly expanding world that we live in. And then in contrast, we've gone from a very, very deeply conservative tribal gate to the North Node in gate 3, which is freaky and individual and mutative, and it's called difficulty in the beginning in the I Ching, the gate of ordering in human design. It's a format gate in the sacral, making this channel of mutation with Pluto in the root, carrying this potential frequency of melancholy because of the uncertainty inherent in the process of transcending the confusion born of the chaos until the new order is established. So we've got this really interesting pairing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that feels like a very big shift. Whereas like the 50 is more, tribal to that individual energy. That feels like that could feel like a very sharp shift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this, you know, the tribal historical instinctive continuity versus this unknown individual pulse is, let's spell it out in a sentence or two. The next 2 months are going to be drawing our collective attention to the collapse of traditional values and the need to establish order in the new situation we find ourselves. And this is not going to be an easy process necessarily, because human minds are not so keen on the lack of certainty. You know, human minds kind of like to have an idea of where they think we're going and what's happening and what we're doing. We're just, the next couple of months might be a bit washing machine-y.
Yeah. Can I share a thought on that?
Please.
One of the things that I just wrote about this, that because I've really been exploring with that 3, is this idea that like everything in life has a pattern and a harmony to it. Mm-hmm. It's just, I was talking, one of my best friends is about to have a baby, and she's like, I'm a little nervous about, you know, I thought this part was hard, but I think the next part is hard. And I was saying it's always hard when you start something new because you haven't caught the pattern yet. But that's why some people get to their 5th baby and they're like, okay, whatever. Like, I know what's going to happen. Maybe the other little ones in the crew are coming and, you know, now you tell them what to do because they're going to help play mom or whatever it may be. But it's that idea that like, I always try to remember when I'm facing a new unknown, it's so easy for me to want to look to the past and go, what did I do to try to find safety in the future? But I've been really reorienting my mind to, there is a rhythm and pattern. I just haven't caught it yet. And the moment that I catch it, whether it's, you know, learning to wake up with the sunrise and walk 18 kilometers in a day, like they're doing on the Camino or whatever it may be, once I catch that new pattern and rhythm in the unknown, it feels chaotic only because I haven't caught it. But once I do, it's going to feel melodic and beautiful, and my body will orient to it. So I think even just as we traverse this new unknown that might feel chaotic and personal and different, you will catch a rhythm in whatever it looks like.
That's beautiful. Really nice. I've got a quote from Kim Gould, Emma's mentor. who wrote about this in her most recent newsletter, quoting now. The transiting north node shows our collective evolutionary edge. The transiting south node shows past experience we can draw from to guide us in uncertain times. We're learning to partner with the chaos and uncertainty from gate 3, understanding that we can shape it into a new culture that embraces the sacred nature of human consciousness, gate 50.
Love that. Oh, that's beautiful. That's a nice way to look at it.
Yeah. We're partnering with the chaos and the uncertainty. We're not resisting it. We're not depressed because everything's a little bit uncertain. We are embracing it and shaping a new culture.
Yeah. We are the change we wish to see in the world at the end of the day.
I feel like I'm going to burst into song in a minute, Jess.
Yeah. That would be new.
I think, there's this, when you really, really connect to the truth of life, it's all uncertain anyway. Like that beautiful meme, relax, nothing is under control, is the truth of the matter. And living comfortably in the uncertainty is something that I feel I've really learned to do through being nomadic for 10 years. I never really know. There's no bedrock, if you like, for me.
Yeah.
And the feeling of floating, anchorless, rudderless, used to feel kind of terrifying, and now it just feels really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like because you've also shifted your anchor from outside being the place of safety and control to a massive amount of trust, and being able to, I think, just for anybody who's listening out there, like being able to listen to your own internal rhythms and harmonies and spending that time alone, you realize you're deeply supported by the universe around you. Even just listening to these energies, like, wow, okay, I know we're about to step into a time where the old is crumbling. We have an opportunity to step into the new together in this very mutative energy. And I can use that energy of the past that's available to me around me to support what's happening, potentially within me. So I think it's that shift from external safety and control to a very deep internal embodied trust, which just comes from time and experience and just leaning into what, life brings and listening.
And there's so many beautiful practices, I mean, my bedrock is this vast, spacious consciousness. And when Kim, at the end of that quote that I just read from Kim, we can shape it into a new culture that embraces the sacred nature of human consciousness. If you personally don't know about the sacred nature of human consciousness, if you haven't recognized it for yourself, this ability that we have to witness, be present, to choose love, to perceive other beings in love, that the sacred nature of human consciousness is the essential bedrock for anyone to get to feel, kind of stable in the instability, because that is unchanging.
And loving. Yeah. I love it. Beautiful.
So, that's the invitation that we get from the nodes for the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Just to try and, we can watch, our attention will be drawn to this process, but where are we watching from? Is the question.
Yeah. Love that.
Interestingly, like correlating with this is Jupiter's activation in July. We've got, if we look at where Jupiter's just been, it's just come out of gates 27. I feel like that's all I've talked about for the past 5 months is gate 27, because it's been so prominent in the nodes, also in Jupiter for the whole month of June, pretty much. Now Jupiter's in gate 24. And this returning, this idea of a potential new way of thinking about things. So I feel like the invitation with Jupiter in 24, bringing all this abundance that Jupiter brings, is the invitation is meditate. Like at its essence, 24 is an automatic mental process that reveals deeper and deeper and deeper layers of truth to us. The more we can, stop panicking with our mind and just relax and trust that We don't need to have the answers. We don't need to figure stuff out. But there is this capacity to know at a very deep level that the mind has when it's soft and receptive. So if you're not already allowing mental silence in your life, in your day, in your moments, then, Jupiter, I think, is going to really make it accessible for us.
Yeah. That's making me think about, again, bringing this for those who are familiar with the gene keys, just thinking about the shadow and the gift in the city. So again, shadow expression, blame, victimization, to the gift is when we open up our heart and we're able to take that energy and change it and shift it. I think about that 24 and its shadow is addiction. So being able to look at our addictions. I know for me, I will sometimes be very addicted to my cell phone. I'm like, I don't want to look at what's in here. Let me scroll. Let me look on Instagram, whatever it may be. And, the gift of invention is really about opening to creativity in a lot of ways and being able to come into silence. That's the city. So I love being able to use that as an anchor for this next couple of months. And what's coming ahead is that slowing down, not being afraid of the silence, but actually learning and embracing what happens in that pause and pulling away what our distractions are to come back home to self.
I mean, the addiction to thinking is the addiction that I see is the problem, is the addiction to thinking that thinking is the answer to the problem when it's actually the problem. Because I don't even know if that sentence made any sense, but for me, there's so much information available just below the level of language, like a richer, more intelligent form of information that unless you've really, learned to meditate and really learn to drop in, you maybe don't know it's there, but it's the information that comes out of that field just in silence it's so rich and so true. It's just extraordinary. So
So maybe that gets to be a beautiful intention for the next couple of months, is finding what that meditative pace is for you, even if it's walking in nature or connecting with the ocean or being with your dog or whatever it may be. Sounds like it could be a nice anchor as we move into this sort of 60 and 3 conjunction in the nodes.
I'm sure there are some people listening to this with a strong activation in 24, maybe, in the incarnation cross, who really recognize it, who are like, that's just a natural state, it just really present for them.
Love that.
I've really had to work at it, to be honest.
Yeah, same. I have a very strong mind, loud, strong mind.
So I had a little look through the lines of this because Jupiter, it goes through in about a month, and we get this really nice opportunity to have a good, let me see how many days. I think it's about 4 or 5 days in each line. 4 or 5 days in each line. So I want to walk through the lines of this process, the 24, from 1 to 6, of what is, 24 is all about having an original knowing, this capacity to know or not know. And so first, in the first line, we have to be willing and able to let go of past ways of thinking, or even of thinking about the past, or thinking like a past version of ourselves. So there's this willingness to change the thinking, to let the thinking be changed, is the first part. Secondly, we have to allow our minds to relax enough to receive the spontaneous concepts. And then, when we receive them, to not egoically identify with them as something that we did, as opposed to something that we received. The third line asks us to get over the potential irrationality of what this new knowing is that just dropped in, because the mind, the rational mind comes in and goes, what now? So we have to get over that as part of the journey. The fourth line asks us to hermit. It says we might need some isolation to enrich this potential of being able to rationalize what it is that we know in a way that other people might understand. The fifth line invites us to get serious about wiping the mental slate clean, because what we now know and rationally understand might be at direct odds with what we thought we knew before. And then finally, in the sixth line, we need to be able to recognize the willingness of others to hear what we know or not. And yet when that gift horse comes, it's called the gift horse, the sixth line, we have to look into the opportunity that's arising for this rational thought to be shared, and notice whether we're listening or whether we're deaf to this opportunity. So that's kind of the process that the Jupiter is going to go through for the month.
Beautiful. I love the direction of that. That feels like very clean to me. I'm like, oh, now I know what to do. I love it.
Quite often when I go through the process with the lines 1 to 6, they're not as neat as this. I think that, for me, the 6 lines in the 24 really do look like a nice, neat process. Sometimes I look at the Ravi Ching and I'm like, oh, rah, I don't know what is going on here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So upgrades to our individual thinking processes, the vibe from Jupiter. And the question for all of us is, are we willing to be wrong about what we thought we knew in order for something inspirational to come in?
Awesome.
The next and final but extensive thing I want to talk about is retrogrades. One of the features in the early part of the year is that we were all direct for quite a while, number of months. So we've got in July a number of other planets joining this season of retrogrades. In general, retrogrades are a going back over, a retrospective, or a chance to look more deeply into whatever the theme is. As we've mentioned Pluto a couple of times in gate acceptance, the gate of limitations in gate 60, and that's currently retrograde. So it's asking us to look more closely about where we're still not accepting certain limitations. We're still not accepting how much discomfort that is causing us, these limitations are causing us. Pluto bringing this kind of deep truth aspect. The limitation that you're struggling to accept is probably buried pretty deep, hidden from conscious view. And so there is this invitation to try and shine a light on it. And just to acknowledge that even then, we might not want to see it. And there might be a really deep part of us that's like, I'm not ready yet. I don't want to look at it.
Yeah. I'm curious for you in the ways in which you're able to discover some of those deeper things. Is it a spontaneous knowing that happens for you? How do you come about these sort of seeing these deeper parts of yourself?
So Emma has this defining moments process, which you might have experienced in HDX. I think it's one of the modules in HDX. In the extended resources section. And I have used it with other people a lot to get under it, but I also use it in myself. So it might be interesting for me to describe the process. I was on meditation retreat a few weeks ago, meditating for many, many hours a day. And at one point I felt this pain in my chest, like right in the center, just behind my sternum. And so I go through Richard Rudd's process to start with, pause, bring the smiling energy in, just sit with it, give it space, start to, allow it rather than react to it. And then I ask myself a couple of the questions that are part of this defining moments meditation. So I ask myself, what age was I when I first felt this feeling? What event caused me to first feel this feeling? And then, I let it kind of unfold from there. And as I was meditating and feeling this feeling in my body, and I got really still, and I'm sitting in this space of kind of conscious, like we're talking about this sacred consciousness that's aware but not reacting. And I asked myself that question: how old was I when I first felt this, and what caused it? And I just got this short sentence: I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And then as I meditated deeper on those words, I could feel almost like it unraveled. The grief. So I was 3 when my granddad died of a heart attack very suddenly. And my dad's grief, my dad wasn't ready to lose his dad. My granddad wasn't ready to die. My whole family wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I was 3. I had a good relationship with him. So my process is to meditate, to access the feeling, and then just to inquire and to see if it will unravel and present itself to me. And the unraveling of that acknowledgement was, I finally understood that my granddad's love has been available to me my whole life. I just didn't know it was there. And then it came in like a rush. It's like this sudden flood of grandfather love that had, real masculine love that I had actually not had access to. I'd had a lot of access to grandmothers, a lot of access to feminine shamanic energy, but I hadn't felt this unconditional, like it's so sweet, the love of a granddad for his 3-year-old granddaughter, and so when I'm trying to access something, I don't use the mind. I always use the sensations of the body to get access to it initially. And then maybe the memory presents itself, or maybe the cause presents itself. But it's deeply, deeply embodied. And it's just my willingness to be with an uncomfortable sensation. Like, it really was quite a strong pain in the middle of my chest. But that's my process.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So for anybody who's listening, maybe if you're an HDXer, going and finding that module could be really supportive as you explore these deeper things that are coming up this month. The body doesn't lie. It's just often that it's easy to want to ignore the body, but that inquiry into the body can provide, and then just having that simple structure and framework like you can find within HDX, even that allow, accept, embrace, the Richard Rudd process of feel the physicality, let it be there, don't resist it, inquire into the emotion, what's there, feel it, and then being able to embrace it is that point of transformation once we've fully seen it, recognized it, and then living in that embodiment. So yeah, those are some beautiful tools, I think, for people to explore this experience this month.
Yeah, and if people haven't done Richard Rudd's Art of Contemplation as an audio course, it's really beautiful. That the guided process of smiling, that's been an absolute game changer for me. That ability to smile with whatever is arising.
Love that. Yeah. Meeting. It reminds me of what he says, the idea of meeting non-love with love. And even if that non-love is, or returning non-love with love, even if that non-love is an aspect within ourselves. So amazing.
Good question, Jess. Thanks.
Yeah.
We've also got Saturn retrograde, back to the retrogrades. Saturn retrograde in 37 has been asking us to look more deeply at all things concerning family, friendship. Might have, because it's Saturn, it might be related to boundaries, physical or otherwise. And we talked about that, I think, last time on the podcast. So as we come into July, we have Neptune and Venus that are also going to be stationing retrograde. Neptune, right at the beginning of July, on the 1st of July, is stationing retrograde in gate 36 in the 6th line, which means we're looking even more deeply at emotional crisis. Perhaps some of us will realize for the first time the state of emotional crisis we're actually in. And I see this a lot on retreat. Of course, people come, and as they start to decompress, it becomes apparent to them that there's a feeling, or a number of feelings, that were not acknowledged, and retreat gives them the space to kind of unpack that a bit. So as we were just describing, this kind of process of uncovering a deeper layer of emotional crisis from the depths of our subconscious, because it's Neptune, Neptune is the depths, he's the subconscious, he's the water, he's the emotion. But he's also dissolution, he dissolves. It's not that these things stick around once we've experienced them, they start to dissolve almost immediately. And one thing I've seen quite a lot, I also do intuitive Reiki sessions, really deep one-to-one work with people. And one of the things I've seen a lot in the last 3 weeks is the impact of medical or even dental interventions coming up. These deeply emotional, painful, physical experiences that we have where we're not consulted, we're not in control. There's a medical process at work, and that can leave these quite deep layers of crisis and fear in the body, loss of agency, loss of trust, of either the process, the people around you, or the body itself. There can be a lot of stuff around that, shame, grief, anger, all kinds of stuff. So these are tricky subjects, but Neptune they're unavoidable at the moment, because this effect of Neptune in the gate of crisis, which has been going on for a very long time and has a while still to go. We've got at least another year of it. So I heard someone use the phrase meta crisis the other day, and I just, immediately was like, that is exactly what Neptune is doing. There are crises across all platforms. There are big turning points and real invitations to go into the depths across all sectors. So yeah, that's where we're at with Neptune.
It sounds like this summer, though, is such, or winter if you're in Australia.
Yeah.
It's a time for like true gentleness with self. Because once we move, I was listening to a woman the other day. Actually, she's Italian, and she talks about the tarot in like the origins in Italy, things like that. And she was talking about the Tower card and a couple of other cards. I can't remember which ones. And specifically with the Tower, she was saying a lot of people see this as a negative card, but it's actually what happens once we've had a crisis of some kind or falling apart is we build anew, right? Everything gets burned away. That's not truth with a capital T within us for that moment in time. So I think being able to see that as an opportunity for your next evolution, right? We can't continue to evolve without, and it seems like this is a theme that's coming through within this whole conversation, is like, we can't continue to take the old forward with us if it's not meant to be a part of our evolution. So even just being gentle with oneself through the process and seeing that catalytic energy we're going to be working with for the next couple months can really start to catapult us in a different direction, as long as we're meeting ourselves and our experience with love.
I mean, that's the whole game, right? My whole capacity to do any of this work is 100% based on my capacity to be compassionate with myself in the process. I couldn't go there, with these deep feelings in my body if I was going to be trying to fix them, feeling ashamed of them. The only thing I can do is just hold this whole process with, I'm doing my best, it's okay, I can be with myself through this. And I appreciate that is probably a mental health privilege, as in I know that not everyone feels able to do that for themselves.
Yeah.
It's quite often the case that we need support from someone who feels safe to hold not only their own space, but space for you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think getting support in whatever way is needed is always important. And it's funny, when you said the word crisis, I was like, I need to look at the etymology of the word crisis. And interesting, in Greek, it means to decide.
Ooh, I have heard that.
Yeah. Which is really interesting. Again, when we're looking at it from that point of, okay, when we have that crisis point or meta crisis, it's a decision point in our lives.
That this has been coming up for me really strongly the last 3 days. I pulled the Ace of Swords for myself the other day, which is a really logical, rational, clear thinking card. It's the beginning of new clear thinking. I'm now listening to the audiobook of Instant Karma by David Michie, which is, just the most gorgeous book. It's so adorable.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't.
You can imagine,
check it out.
Instant Karma. It's quite triggering in a lot of ways if you're not familiar with the concept of karma. But I'm a long-term Buddhist practitioner, so I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that, I say it like it's a fact, the belief that everything that happens to me somehow was caused by me in the past. And so all the power is in my hands to change the causes for the future by how I'm responding in the moment. But yeah, there's been a really strong energy of decision, like clear thinking. So even though we're in this 36.6 of recognition of feeling, that's what 36 is all about, saying, become aware of the truth of how you actually feel. Unless you do that, your change making which is the 35 when this energy gets to the throat, it's based on a half perception. Unless you can actually really be with how you feel and have the courage to be honest enough with yourself and admit that you feel a certain way. The darkening of the light is the Chinese I Ching. And unless you can face your own perceived darkness, and it is a perception, it's not, the darkness, as soon as you shine light on darkness, it ain't darkness anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that process is, really clear.
Yeah.
From there, the decision, from there, the change.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
I pulled a few little, I like to quote directly from the texts, from I think it's from, I didn't actually reference where it's from. I'm pretty sure it's from the Ravi Ching. The ultimate role of 36 is to be a witness, to remember, and to reflect. Change becomes something that is either dreaded or embraced. Line 6 in the gate 36 is called justice, and it's related to the fact that the forces of darkness eventually destroy themselves. Again, a direct quote from the Ravi Ching. So that even through the sorrow and the cynicism, the potential for justice is there. And the keynote of this gate is the inevitable survival of right. So, you know, we're watching the forces of darkness destroy themselves at the moment.
Sure.
And just leaning on the inevitable survival of right.
Yeah. Love that. With a capital R. Yeah.
So that's kind of still the Neptune process for the dates. You know, it went in March 2002. It's going to be there till February 2025. There will be a little break in April, May 2024 next year, but we've still got a bit of a ways to go with this. There's a lot of dissolution to be done.
Yeah.
And then lovely Venus, she's also retrograde. So the last time Venus was retrograde was 18 months ago in December, January, over the Christmas New Year period, 2021 to 22. And it's almost, when you look at the mandala, it's almost on the opposite side of the mandala of where it's going to be retrograding this time. So last time it was in 60, 61, 54, and 38, all around that kind of Rave New Year period, towards the end of the quarter of mutation. And it was in the base trigram of Lake and the Lake the Joyous. This time, from the 23rd of July all the way through to the 3rd of September, Venus is going to be retrograding in gates 29, 4, 7, and 33. So you can look over at the beginning of quarter 3 and see that little swathe of 4 gates. So quarter 3 is purpose fulfilled through relationships or bonding, and it's mostly in the base trigram of water. So again, we're looking at this watery energy. It's Venus, and it's the quarter of purpose fulfilled through bonding and relationships. So it's much more the focus there. I'm really kind of excited about the first part of this retrograde. So a retrograde, a period of deep reflection. I'm going to digress slightly, and then I'm going to come back to the specifics of gate 29. So in a number of his musings on Venus as an influence, Ra had talked about how the Romans were afraid of the traditional interpretations of Venus, like the historical, cultural ones. So the Romans made her the goddess of love and art and beauty, you know, all the non-threatening things. But the Mayans heralded her rising in the sky, like as Venus rose in the sky was their time for ritual sacrifices and executions to the gods. She was a very sharp energy, so not quite so soft. She is deep yin. The Mayans called Venus the eye, the one who sees. And in ancient cultures, sacrifice was all about purification on behalf of the collective. They used their ritual sacrifices to purify the collective. And their societal values were built around these rituals as a giving back, you know, as, you know, we'll sacrifice what's precious to us so that we continue to receive from you, is kind of part of the deep culture of that. So Venus in human design terms represents our common morality. It's about values, what we collectively believe is right and wrong, and also individually what we believe is right and wrong. So it's like a collective agreement. So we might have a collective agreement now, like it's wrong to sacrifice a living being to a rising star as a ritual, but that, you know, it represents this shifting of values. Most of us believe that it's fine for us all to have the latest iPhone, and yet there is, of course, sacrifice involved somewhere invisible to us for that.
Sure.
So we have kind of outsourced our sacrificing in our culture.
Yeah.
So
interesting to think about. I did not know that. So now I've learned something very new.
Yeah. So Venus wasn't always love and beauty. That was a Roman invention.
Okay.
But still always been yin, always been very associated with this receptive feminine. So, but I mean, when you think about the receptive feminine in nature, I mean, I don't know how much time the people of the podcast spend listening and watching what goes on in nature. There is constant sacrifice.
Yeah.
Constant sacrifice. Something is always dying to support the life of something else. It's like inherent in nature.
Yeah.
So it is something that our culture has kind of tried to sanitize out of our lived experience, but it's very deep in just the way of things, you know?
Yeah.
If no one had ever passed on, it'd be pretty crowded down here, you know?
This is the truth. I live on the beach, and there's pelicans that are constantly diving and head bombing into the water. And I'm like, everything eats everything.
Everything eats everything. I can't remember if it was the last podcast or the one before where Emma was saying it's like, it's either I'm getting eaten or I'm eating something. Like, this is just, yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so back to Venus retrograde. With from a value standpoint, Venus enters gate 29 on the 8th of July, and that's good where it's going to retrograde. So at least in the first part. So we start to get awareness of gate 29, the gate of saying yes. We're going to start to get awareness around the commitments we've made and what we've said yes to. When Venus stations retrograde in 29 on the 23rd of July, we might then start to really find ourselves in a period of deep reflection about whether or not we should have said yes to that thing. What commitments and responsibilities have we piled up in our life? Are they actually in alignment with our values, with what we believe is right and wrong? Because that can be a really stark reflection. Like, am I actually committing my sacral energy to something in alignment with my values?
Yeah.
Maybe no.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What I also think about when we look at the word the gate of saying yes, it's a mechanical sacral desire to say yes to stuff, and it's not an awareness center. So the understanding might come later that once we've said yes to something, I kind of need to see this through. Like, I'm gonna have to complete this. I probably shouldn't have said yes, but now I'm in. But the keynote from the Ravi Ching is the deep within the deep. Persistence, despite difficulties, has its inevitable rewards. So there are rewards if we can see it through. Mm-hmm. It's the deep within the deep because it's double trigram, it's water over water. It's the abysmal or the abyss.
Yeah.
But I think, having really, because this is one of my sacral activations in an undefined sacral. And yet I've never really reflected on it. And yet for the sake of you lovely podcast people, I was like, right, I'm going to get to the bottom of this because I have, conscious and unconscious activations in this game.
Yeah.
I think this other aspect is the key to unlocking its potential magic. And I think that is in the ability to say yes to the experience you're already having.
Mm.
If you look closely at the way that our mind is habituated, for lots of us, it's habituated with deep resistance to what we're experiencing. There's almost an auto function in the mind that says, this isn't quite right. I don't quite like it. I don't want it. It's unsatisfying. I want to change it. I want it to be better. I want different, or not here, or whatever. A lot of our lived experience, there is a resistance to, and not a complete opening and a saying yes to. And, whenever I'm working with someone else in a Reiki session, there is this, I can feel the resistance arise in them, and I can feel the feeling that wants to be felt. And part of my role is to help guide them to surrender and say yes enough to allow the energy to move. Otherwise it gets blocked and it stays buried. So I also think Venus in 29 is asking us to consider which parts of our lived moment-to-moment experience are we actually not saying yes to, and how much sacral power is that expressing? Like, what if we surrendered to the moment with all that it contains and said yes? What would that look like?
I love that. It's making me also think about, just to throw a little thought in here around the programming partner, right? Think about North Node, South Node, the oppositions. Is the 30, the gene key 30 or the gate 30, which in its shadow, we're always chasing desire, and we're saying yes to everything because we think it's going to bring us something that we want, that we're just desiring, but desire can be so elusive. And so it's about the ability to be able to hold life with a sense of lightness, and hold our desires with a sense of lightness, and maybe even hold the present moment with a sense of lightness. So I love being able to think about that idea of, like, if I'm resisting the present moment, what is the desire outside of me that I'm chasing, that I'm thinking is going to make this moment better than it is right now. So I love that reminder to say yes to what is now, because chances are at some point, years ago, months ago, you were desiring for your life to look the way that it does now. So can we be in it and celebrate it and what we've created without looking to the next moment for more than what's now?
Yeah. I mean, 30 gate of the fates, right? This eventually in its highest expression, it's like, I surrender.
Yeah.
Bring me what you bring me.
Yeah.
It's also a tantric channel. If you look at the whole channel, this 29 is one of the tantric channels coming from the sacral to the G, and it connecting. And where does it go? Gate 46, love of the body. Like so my activations, this contemplation, both of my 29s are in, 29 is in line 4, exalted, as my personality Saturn. And line 4 is directness, the keynote being the shortest distance between 2 points in a straight line, the wisdom to use the simplest and most direct approach to solve difficulty. And 9 times out of 10, the difficulty is the resistance, and the shortest route out of that resistance is to say yes to the resistance. And when I actually go right into this, what am I resisting? What have I been resisting? I'm resisting my own sacred, sensual, tantric nature. I'm resisting loving my own body. And that is what so many people are resisting saying yes to, is this total abandon of ourselves to the fullness of human experience, the richness of the body, its sensuality, the potential for the discovery of this goddess within. It's like the agony and the ecstasy of our own sacred body is what a lot of us are resisting. And so Venus in 29, this is an invitation to the divine feminine power of life. It's like going barefoot, rolling naked in the grass, standing in the summer rain and getting drenched, lying on a rock in the sun, feeling the sensuality of the warm rock beneath you. Like this is a deep, deep connection with our body as earth and as nature, and being able to say yes to that, the animal body that we live in.
Beautiful. I have the 46 as my conscious earth, and man, have I lived out the shadow and the gift of a lot of the shadow of that 46. But yeah, being able to enjoy those sensual pleasures of life and taste the food as you're eating it and be in your body. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a gorgeous, gorgeous retrograde for Venus. Really, just so beautiful. I mean, I don't know if Mary Oliver's poem Wild Geese, which I basically have learned by heart because it's the most important poem on earth, and I want to be able to recite it to myself on my deathbed. But the line in that, you don't have to be good, you don't have to walk on your knees for 100 miles repenting through the desert. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. I mean, that's it. That's all you've got to do. Just let this soft animal love what it loves.
Yeah, love that.
Another interesting kind of side note to this is if you're looking at Venus in the sky during July, especially early in the month, you're going to see Mars right next to her. Mars is going to be in gate 29 from the 1st to the 10th of July. So they're next to each other in this as Venus starts to think about going retrograde. And so they do conjunct from the 7th to the 10th of July. And that's bringing both the divine masculine and the divine feminine together. And a real invitation, I think, to say yes to both sides of ourselves, However we personally identify, we are all the most balanced, harmonious people I know have fully integrated the masculine and the feminine. They've understood their own power and their own receptivity. We've also then, as Venus continues slowing down in gate 29 to enter her retrograde, Mars is then moving into gate 59, the gate of sexuality. So I think really July, this Venus-Mars potent kind of sensual, sexual love of the body is just, it's begging for it,
Yeah. The Marvin Gaye song just came in my head. We could make this like musical transit podcast. Let's get it on with yourself.
Yeah. Love.
We'll add a little, or however it shows up for you. But yeah, I love that.
And of course, we all know, I don't think there's a person listening to this that hasn't some hurt that's been imposed on them through the culture, and in relation to loving the body and loving our own sensuality. I mean, if you're British, you're probably as prudish as I am.
Yeah.
So it's just one of the expressions of living in an animal body on a fertile earth, is acknowledging that everything is sexual, everything is life and death and birth, and
Yeah.
just the great soup of life.
Even the idea, I know Richard Rudd talks about this, I might be butchering it a bit, but he talks about this idea of like our auras penetrate each other when we're with each other, right? Even just you and I doing this together creates this sort of collective aura between the two of us that feels different than perhaps just being in yours or being in mine. I just want to say before we move on is I just love the story that is being weaved together with all of these different energies and how they're playing out. And this idea that while we may be in one area of our life in a choice point or like crisis, a decision point, we might also at the same time be exploring this idea of saying yes to self, yes to life, yes to all aspects of ourself, and how beautifully those dance with each other to be able to say, this may be happening here while you're also being invited to explore yourself from a different perspective and dimension, and being able to have the awareness that this podcast provides to be able to use it as an anchor within self is really unique and powerful. So
yeah, it really is. I mean, I think that's a lovely summary to say where we're at, while it's all about balance, right? It's all about not getting too lost in any one aspect of this and allowing it all to be present. If I spent all my time looking at world events, I would be unbelievably miserable.
Yeah.
If I would spend all my time frolicking naked in a stream, I would be unbelievably disconnected.
Yeah.
I would feel connected to nature, but I would feel divorced from what's actually happening for a lot of people. So we've got to find a place somewhere in the middle that feels like we're connected to what's real, as in not digital, but really out there, the rising of the sun and the cool breeze and the rain and the sun and the things.
Yeah.
And also acknowledge that we're at a time where human ingenuity / possibly stupidity has got us to this technological precipice. So yeah, we're holding a lot right now. And I think anyone that's looked at human history even very briefly will understand that we, in our human history, from the cultures that we remember, I mean, there may have been very advanced technology cultures that we don't remember, but from where we're at, the one we remember, this is a big time. It's a lot. So yeah, we just have this incredible balancing act, if you like, to do in each of those.
Yeah. And dance. I think if we can dance between them and see it as nothing ever truly comes into balance, right? Even in your body, if your body, the pressures in your body come into balance, you're dead, right? Because even thinking about the heart chamber, we have to have the blood goes from like high pressure to low pressure or whatever it may be, but it's always dancing between those energies. So I love what you said. If I'm just laying on the rock all day long for months and years, and right, I'm out of touch with this other very real part of reality as well. So I love that idea of dancing, balancing, and moving between, and recognizing there's literally no right answer. It's just your own human experience, and you get to play with the celestial energies in the way that they are lived for you, because your experience is likely very different than mine, than Emma's, than anyone else's.
Yeah, I've been in a really interesting conversations all month with various friendship groups about perception and the ways of, basically one of my very old school friends, who I've known since I was 11, sent a message to our circle of friendship that we have had since school. We've all known each other for 35 years. And she was like, guys, when you picture a horse, when someone says picture a horse, do you really actually see a picture of a horse in your head? And we were like, yeah, why? And she was like, I have no images in my head. And so this has started this whole, she has something called aphantasia, where her brain doesn't generate images of any kind, even when she dreams. And only just at the age of 45 realized this. So I've spent a whole month like having these conversations, getting super curious with people about what is it like in there for you. And I think what we're seeing collectively as we sort of start to understand more about all these forms of neurodivergence and perceptual divergence is just this understanding that we really are 8 billion utterly unique beings with incredible individual experiences of this experience of life. You couldn't possibly create a norm if you tried.
Yeah.
There is no norm.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It will be fun on the podcast to listen to even how Emma and Taylor and her son and Elizabeth all experience the energies very differently as well on their shared Camino trip, which I feel like relates back to exactly what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding I don't know if you've looked into the kind of the rave cosmology side of human design and this understanding of what happens to the personality crystal when it's done down here.
No, I haven't.
Well, the teaching of human design is that, yes, the design crystal bundle comes with the monopole from the earth. And then when the cortices are ready to hold a personality crystal, that's called in, and it stays here in this arranged marriage for the duration of life. And then at the end of life, the design crystal bundle goes back to the earth, and the personality crystal goes back to one of the bundles of personality crystals around the earth and informs them of. And so there are some personality crystals in the bundles around the earth that never incarnate. And so the role of our personality crystal is to witness and be part of and learn. And then when we go back, we educate it. When it goes back, it educates the bundle that it returns to, is what Ra said happens.
Wow. That's a new rabbit hole that I am going to be going down now.
So if we look at life from that perspective, when you're like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? Just be, like Ra said, be the passenger, be present, witness, so that you grow and learn and filter stuff through these crystals and fractal, and then you go back and the whole of the consciousness is newly informed from what you've learned down here.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a trillion different cosmologies in the world that say what happens when we die, but that's the human design version.
Yeah.
And I find it a nice reflection to be like, what's my job again? Oh, I'm just being a woke personality crystal, making sure I'm paying attention to everything that's happening so that I see what I'm supposed to see. Yeah, exactly. I'm just reporting back.
Yeah. Very cool. I like that.
All right. That seems like a nice place to call it a day.
Amazing. Well, thanks for being here. Everybody, thanks for playing with us today and experiencing a little bit of a different energy, I guess, on the energy combination on the Transits podcast for this month. And I hope you guys all have an amazing rest of your day and an amazing July ahead. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast, or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.